Hello and welcome to computer class. My name is Dave and today we are talking about 10 basic HTML tags. And this will get you a good handle on the HTML language, give you a good uh, basic understanding of how to build simple things in HTML and how the containers start to get structured. And by the end of today, you'll probably know a good 10% of the language of HTML because these tags are used so much in HTML, and that's why they're in this lesson. So let's get right into it. The first thing I want you to do is to create a spreadsheet in Google Sheets and list the pieces of code that we give today. And it's very important that you keep track of throughout these lectures in a spreadsheet the code because it's easier to remember the code that way and study it, if that makes sense. Rather than having to go back through all the different slides or rewatch the videos, you can have it all in one place kind of as a cheat sheet. And so what I have done is I have made a Google Sheet here, and I will start that now. I opened up my Google Sheets, and we're going to do a little, extension on the line here by grabbing the middle, and we'll do code and explanation. All right, so we have the code and the explanation. Then I'll click in the number 1 here, and let's do view, freeze, and then 1 row. So it freezes the 1 row. And now we're going to write the code that we get here. And by the way, we can, on this sheet, we can say this is HTML. And of course, our title is going to be code for websites. Okay, so now that we have this here, each of our subsequent slides we can kind of write down and make sure that we have. Okay, so we have this spreadsheet that you are going to keep track of the code in as we go. So number 1, the first tag that I want to give you today is called the doctype declaration. Okay, the doctype declaration or the document type declaration. All HTML documents must start with a document type declaration, and it is seen here in red. It has exclamation point, doctype, and a space in HTML. Now you can write pretty much all HTML tags in capitals or lowercase. Most people are going to prefer to write it in lowercase because that's just how it is. A lot of people, though, prefer to write the doc type declaration in uppercase and everything else in lowercase. And I don't know why that is, but it's just a thing you will see. I don't. I write everything in lowercase, and here is pretty much how it's going to look right there. So let's add that tag to our spreadsheet. So we have a bracket, doc type, HTML. Document type declaration. Okay, let me just make this a little bit bigger so you guys can see it. All right, moving on. So that is imperative tag number 1. You have to start all documents with this. Okay, and this basically declares that you're writing HTML5. Okay, I don't know if I said that or not. Number 2 is the root element, and HTML document itself begins with HTML and ends with the /HTML, and these tags are known as the root elements. It declares that everything in between is going to be written as HTML. So the root elements are very important. They're the overall container of your HTML page. They're the biggest container. If we were going to talk about this in terms of food, they would be the hamburger buns of a hamburger. And then everything else inside would be the patty, the lettuce, tomato, and everything that's inside. It would be the biggest container if we were talking the container example I used last class period, where you're stacking things, the containers, the Tupperwares inside of each other. This is the biggest container, so to speak. So let's add that to our spreadsheet. So here we go. HTML /HTML. And so you need to have that, and that is the root element. Okay. All right. Next, number 3. We have the visible and invisible. And these are 2 sections of the HTML document known as the head and the body. The head element is the invisible container, and it's used for metadata or data about the page. And so examples of tags that might go inside of this would be the tag, the meta, and lots of other things, but possibly scripts, not a lot of times, but possibly scripts. You could link in your CSS there if you want to. So potentially other tags go in this, but these are always unseen. So I know it's kind of an inverse illustration, but if you look at your when you're using your head as an example in this illustration, the head is unseen. That doesn't make any sense, but the head's unseen, and that's just how it is. But the body is seen. So anyway, that's kind of this. So this is the invisible portion of the document. So we're going to call it we're going to put the head in here. And let's say invisible container slash, and we could also say, according to this, that this is it contains data about the page. All right, so that's very important. The next one, of course, is going to be the visible. While we're here, container, might as well put that in, and we'll call it the body. Right, and this is going to contain all visible elements of the page. So that should be the next one, and it is. The body tag is the visible part of the HTML document. Between the body and the closing body tag, you can have things like paragraphs, links, images, and a host of other tags that could show up and structure your HTML containers. So the body tag is probably a very, very important tag. If we were going to compare this to the sandwich illustration, probably the patty is the body, but then your lettuce and tomato, your not really visible things when you stick the bun on top of it, is up in the head section, if you will. So these are the two major containers. You also could have a header and a footer too as well, but these are just even bigger containers than those, so to speak. I'm just giving you 10 of the most typical basic tags that everybody must know starting out, if you will. But we'll get into other tags later. Number 5 is give the browser tab a name. So in the head section, we're going to put we're going to nest a tag inside of that and give it the title. This gives your actual browser tab a name. So if you notice, the tabs actually have two things in them. They have a favicon or favicon, whoever you get the wording from, and they also have a title of the browser tab. This is how you actually title it right here by using this title tag. So let's put that in to our spreadsheet here. Title names the browser, or I should say titles the browser tab. All right, titles the browser tab. There we go. Number 6, headings. Now headings are defined as H1 through H6 when it comes to these tags. And H1 is defined as the most important heading on the page, and H6 is defined as the least important heading. And so there is a sort of an unspoken rule. You don't really have to do this, but you probably should if you want to write good HTML, that there will usually only be one H1 tag on the entire page. That's because it will probably be the most important heading, and it will be the only one that's most important. The rest of them will follow suit. And if you use each one of these H1s, you'll see that by default, HTML assigns a certain font size to them, and they get smaller as you get down in the H's. So as you get to, like, the H6 is the smallest, but the H1 is the largest. And you can style them to be anything you want using CSS, so that's not really an issue. It's not like it's locked in place. However, it's usually traditional, and this is a stylistic thing to help people write good code, is that you would use H1 once and have it the largest piece of text on the page, usually the heading, obviously the name of the page, and then all the other subsequent, whether it be subheadings or whatever, would be H2, 3, 4, all the way down, kind of like a bullet pointed outline. So in an outline, you might have Roman numeral 1, Roman numeral 2. Those would be the biggest headings, but if you break it out and go into A and B, they would be H2, and then the 1 and the 2 underneath the A and B would then be H3, and subsequently downward as you're making an outline, so to speak. That would be, for example, writing a paper. But in this case, we're actually writing a web page and it has text and information on it, and so you would follow the same kind of idea that you would follow in the research paper world, whereas the biggest heading is the largest. All right, so that's the explanation of that. In order to type these out, I'm actually going to just grab the whole entire stinking thing, copy it, and drop it in here. Okay. In order for you to go to the next line, I believe you have to, when you're in the cell, you have to hit Control and then Enter to actually do um, a multi-line insert here. Okay, so these are headings. Oops, headings. Okay, now we have explanation of that. Moving on. Number 7, paragraphs. The P tag, I know, don't get the P tag or paragraph tag defines a paragraph. So you would put this on the beginning and the ending of a paragraph, and that's exactly, it's pretty self-explanatory. If you don't know what a paragraph at this point is, then, go Google it. So, oops, started wrong there. Paragraph. Again, as you can see here with the tags, we are marking up the information, one on either side. Okay. Number 8, images. Images are defined with the image tag. Now, there's a caveat. This is the first tag that's unique that we're learning out of these 10. The 8th one here has a couple attributes associated with it. An attribute simply adds on to the tag and is in between. And this is also a unique tag as well, because this tag doesn't have a closing tag. Okay, so that's unique about it as well. And it has 4 attributes, sorry. The source, the alt, the width, and the height. Okay, and they're very important, and you have to have them to get this tag to work. And notice they are all inside, and then the ending bracket is there. So this is kind of a huge universal tag here. So let's actually put that entire thing in there, okay, into our spreadsheet. I'm going to scroll down here. There we go, we dropped it in. Oh, we're out of room already. Let's see if we can wrap this. Text wrapping, boom. Okay, so this is an image. And with attributes. Okay, image with attributes, and these are the attributes of source, alt. Now source happens to be, let me go back to my slide here. The source happens to be the location of the image in the directory structure. And we haven't talked about directory structures yet, but basically it points to usually a folder, and I don't have a folder listed here, but usually a folder and an actual file, an actual image, a JPEG in this case, a location basically is what the source is. The alt is then a description of the page, of the image, just in case the image doesn't load, or if we need to identify the image for things like screenwriters, script, things that read web pages to people that are blind, you need to have actual text written in there because you can't read an image to someone who's blind. And then so it's for accessibility options there. And then you have to have the width and the height of the image in pixels, or you could do it in rems or other measurements. Okay, so that is that one. Then next we have HTML links. So a link is also a really unique tag in the fact that it has, again, another attribute. And the attribute is called href. And href stands for hyperreference. It has to do, if you remember, we talked about how the word link on the internet actually stands for hyperlink. But this stands for hyperreference, which is similar in nature. Basically, you would put a link to anything. It could be another HTML page. It could be a link to another site. It could be a link to, again, basically anything out there, a video or something. And then whatever you put in between the tags right in here happens to be the clickable attribute, if that makes sense, or the clickable spot, or it shows up as clickable, whatever you want to say. I don't know how else you would say that. So let's actually add this to our code here. All right, and this is link with attribute. Okay. And again, the one attribute it has is href. So make sure you take note of that. Number 10, we have meta. And meta information about is basically metadata information is about data. That information goes in the head section, the unseen portion. It just tells someone who might look at your code more information about your web page. And it's just helpful to have. A lot of developers really appreciate this if you give a description of the page, if you give keywords, if you give the author, if you also need to have a viewport, if you're going to make your web page resizable for different devices or mobile friendly, for instance. But for today, we're just going to take one of the meta tags that I think is probably the most important. That has to do with the character set, and it's using the encoding of UTF-8. So you need to know that. You have to put that in your websites. And there are lots of different types of lots of different formats to use on your website, but this is the one that's used today. Okay, so this is your character set. Okay, and that has to do with basically you want to make sure your characters are set to 8. No big deal, it's pretty obvious. Okay, it's a specification. So anyway, you have to have it in there and to write an HTML page. Okay, so let's actually do this real quickly before we go. Let's just put all this together in a cohesive type project. So boot up your favorite code editor. For me, it's Brackets. For you, might be Atom or Visual Studio Code or Sublime Text or some other one, but whatever. Notepad, for instance, if that's all you got. But you can download this one free. So I'm going to hit File, New, and I'm going to File, Save As, and I'm going to save it to my desktop. And I'm going to entitle this, of course, you know it already, index.html. I'm going to blow this up just a tiny bit. And then we're going to start by doing the doctype HTML. And then we're going to do the HTML tag. And when we do that, it gives us the secondary one because it writes for us a little bit. And you just press enter and push it down. And then we're going to do tab to move in. And then you would do the unseen portion of the document, the head. And you push that down. And then we could tab in here and do the body section. And we could erase that as well and tab in. Okay, so now we have our our unseen. So what goes in the unseen portion? Well, the title, as you may well have guessed, this is a title. All right. And also we said something else, the meta tag with the character set of UTF-8. There it is. All right, we've got that. Now that we've got our character set, let's put in a heading. And of course, you might have one heading on the page. In this case, we have a very small HTML page, so one heading. H1 and say this is a heading. Okay, using our hotkeys if we wanted to, we could sort of, I just want you to be able to see that there are sizes to the headings. So I'm going to do a second one as well and move this one to H2. And then I'm going to put a paragraph in between. So the P tag, this is a paragraph. And again, this is very simple stuff. And I'll just copy this as well. Control C, enter, Control V. All right, and Control S saves. Now, if we load up this simple HTML document, which actually I didn't do everything I said that I would do. Let me just real quickly, now that we have this code grabbed down, drop in an image as well. Can't do an image. We don't have a directory structure. Let's just do a link just for illustration. We'll do an image another time in a separate lesson. Oops. There we go. We'll drop in one link here. All right. Wow. It's a little cockeye. All right. Make sure that's all one line. Okay. So Control Save. Control S. Let's load it up. It's on my desktop. Double click, and there we have it. So as you can see, there's our H1 tag. It's a little bit larger than the H2 tag, and there's our paragraph by default styling. This right here is our link. If we click it, it takes us to w3schools.com, which is pretty awesome. Again, not a very flowery HTML page. Obviously, the reason it doesn't look that good is because we don't have CSS, and that's the sort of the styling part of a website. And then notice up in the browser tab, we don't have our favicon or favicon, however you say it, because we didn't add one, and we're not really going to. But we have this as a title, just like we wrote in our code. If you notice, this is the title, right? And this is exactly the things that we wrote. And again, notice the href took me to the exact website that I stuck in there. So you can see everything working. Now I didn't show you how to actually do the image tag, which we'll do in a separate lesson because it requires something we haven't talked about yet, but I will get back to that. And so hopefully this lesson has been helpful and you've learned something about the top 10 useful HTML tags, and I will see you in the next video.